Alright, let's look at 3.1. 3.1 talks about polynomials. And here's two examples of polynomials. Notice this one has a fourth degree, third degree, second degree, first degree, and 0 degree. So these terms, things that are being added or subtracted, typically have a letter and a number called a coefficient. And some of them, like the constant term, don't have a letter. Here's another example. By the way, this one's a polynomial of degree 4. Fourth power is the highest power there. This one has the highest power 6, so it's a polynomial of degree 6. And notice not every term is represented, but that's fine. It's still a polynomial. Now this specific polynomial we'll be talking a lot about is degree 2, or the quadratic polynomial. This is the quadratic function, and you're used to the a, b, and c that you plug into the quadratic formula, right? And this is a different form of rewriting this. It's a special case of completing the square. And I'll show you that in just a little bit when we get to question 11. The vertex is found by just looking at these two numbers here. You change the sign of this guy and you keep whatever this guy is. Now if a is less than 0 or negative, you have a maximum. If a is greater than 0, you have a minimum. Okay? Now another way to find the vertex is to figure out what negative b over 2a is, using your a, b, and c up here. And once you know what that is, plug it back into the function to figure out what the y value is. And that's another way to find the vertex. So in 3.1, the very first question is 1. To put the quadratic formula function in vertex form, we complete the word is square. Number 2, the quadratic function is in vertex form. The graph of the function is a parabola with vertex hk, or negative b over 2a, f of negative b over 2a. They probably wanted that one, hk. Part B, if a is positive, then the graph opens upward and it has a minimum. If a is negative, it opens downward and it has a maximum. Okay, and then question 5. Question 5 says, they give you a graph and they say find the coordinates of the vertex, and you can just look at the graph and you can figure out its vertex. It's not too hard to figure that out. And the x and y intercepts by factoring this and set equal to 0, or by letting x equals 0 and you get y equals negative 5. Part B, find the maximum value of f. It's the y coordinate of your vertex is your maximum. Remember, your vertex is made up of two numbers. One number is whatever x needs to be in order for y to be a maximum. Alright. And C, they ask you to find the domain and range of the function. Well, if you look at it, it's minus infinity to infinity for the domain and minus infinity to 4 for the range. Okay, and the same thing here with this one. You can see the vertex is 1, negative 3. And to find the x-intercept, I factored it, and I got down to here. There's 2 x-intercepts, and there's 1 y-intercept. And then it's got a minimum at negative 3. The y value is always your minimum or maximum. And again, there's your domain and range. Alright, so here's the first one we're looking at with dealing with the completing the square. So you start out with this guy, okay? And if you have an a here that's not 1, you have to factor it out, which we'll see when we get to question 20. But these first two, they give you a nice time of letting a equal 1. So then what you do is you add and subtract the same number to the same side, because you're not messing with the left-hand side to make this equal to it. To make this the same problem, you got to add and subtract the same number so it doesn't change the problem at all. Alright, so you take your b, negative 6, divide it by 2, negative 3, and then square it. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So positive 9 and negative 9. I put a blank out there, 2 blanks, because I know I'm going to fill in these two numbers that are opposites. Alright, so now these first 3 numbers will always factor, and the last one you'll always leave alone. Now this first one's factor, if you want to know what this ends up being here, just remember you took your b and you divided it by 2, and you got negative 3. That's what goes there. It's the number you get before you square it. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Then part B says find the vertex, and the vertex is, remember it's HK, right? H is, you change the sign of this guy to positive 3, and you keep the sign of this guy, negative 9. Okay? Just like on 16, you change the sign of the negative 1, and you keep the 1. And on 20, you change the sign of that one to 1, and you keep the 1. And for 29, you change the sign of 3 halves to negative 3 halves, and you keep whatever that is. Okay? And you change the sign of this one to minus 1 half, and you keep whatever that is. Alright? So that's how you figure out what HK is. Alright, so let's go back and let's finish completing the square. We write this as a perfect square, and then this part is left over. So there's our HK, and we found our vertex. To find the y-intercept, you let x equal 0, and that gives you y equals 0. To find the x-intercept, you let y equal 0, and you can factor down to x and x minus 6, which gives you 0 and 6. Okay? And you get your domain and range by just looking at the graph. Now 16. Again, you don't have to worry about the a being something other than 1, because it is 1. That's fine. Okay, so now you push this constant out to the end. You're going to just leave it alone. And now you're going to add and subtract some number. Well, what number are you going to add? Well, negative 2 divided by 2 squared. Remember, it's this b over 2 squared. So negative 2 over 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. So plus 1, minus 1. These first three numbers break down to this guy. These last guys will combine. So these guys give you a perfect square of x minus 1 squared. And these guys give you a plus 1. Okay? So if there is a constant, there wasn't one in the first one. If there is a constant, you just leave it outside. Don't let it mess up your work here. And then you add and subtract some number. The first one that you added helps you to complete the square. It's something squared. These other two parts combine to give you your outside number, which is your k. So HK is 1, 1. Y-intercept is where x equals 0, y equals 2. X-intercept is where y equals 0, and if you look at this guy, it doesn't have one because it never crosses the x-axis. Okay, number 20. Now we're getting a little bit harder because now a is no longer 1. So what you have to do is you have to factor out, remember we're going to leave this last guy outside. We don't want to mess with it. It'll combine with another number to give us our k. But right now we take this guy, these two guys, and factor out a negative 3. When you pull out a negative 3 out of negative 3x squared, you get x squared. Pull out a negative 3 out of positive 6x, you get negative 2x. Check it. Minus 3 times x squared is minus 3x squared. Minus 3 times minus 2x is positive 6x. Alright, so now you look at this guy, divide it by 2, and square it. Minus 2 divided by 2 is minus 1. Minus 1 squared is 1. So you have 1 and minus 1. Okay? Now, when you move this guy out to combine with the other, and that will create your k for you, you have to hit it with the negative 3. Because you're taking it outside the parentheses, it gets hit with a negative 3. So negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. This inside part gives you a perfect square. This last part gives you your k. And you still have your a out front. So you have your a, your h, and your k. HK is 1, 1 in this case. Y-intercept is where x equals 0, so it's minus 2. X-intercept, you got to do quadratic formula. And you get this nasty guy here. So this is what this guy looks like. And there's the domain. 29, again, a is not 1, it's negative 1. So factor a negative 1 out of the first two terms and leave this 3 outside. Okay, so you factor out a negative 1 out of that, you get x squared and plus 3x. So now you take this guy and divide it by 2 and square it. So 3 over 2, And then squared is 3 over 2 times 3 over 2, or 9 over 4. Plus 9 over 4 and minus 9 over 4. And now when you move that guy out there, you got to hit it with that negative. So the negative 9/4 times the negative 1 gives you positive 9/4. And now this part is a perfect square, and this part combines to give you 21/4. So now you know negative 3 over 2, positive 21 over 4. Okay, so always leave this constant outside and don't mess with it. Factor out a if you need to. Then add and subtract b over 2 squared. Then move that second term outside and make sure it hits with the a if there is one. And now you've got your perfect square, and now you've got your k. Your y-intercept, your x-intercepts, and all that. I think you can do that. Number 30, write it in descending order. You see your a is negative 1. So you factor out a negative 1 out of these two, you leave the plus 1 outside. So you factor out a negative 1 out of these two, and you get x squared plus 1x. Alright, so what are we going to add and subtract? Well, 1 divided by 2 squared, which is 1/4, and minus 1/4. When you move that guy outside, it gets hit with the negative 1, so it's positive 1/4. And now this guy gives you x plus h, x plus 1/2 squared. This part gives you your k. And so you have minus 1/2, positive 5/4. Y-intercept, where x equals 0, x-intercept, you let x equal your negative b, plus or minus, all that. You find your vertex. Remember, your maximum is the y value. And it's where x equals negative 1/2. So there's a maximum at x equals negative 1/2 of the maximum value is 5/4, and it's found at minus 1/2. Okay. Now the rest of these guys are finding the vertex in the more general sense. You write down your a, b, and c, and all you have to do is figure out what x is. X equals negative b over 2a. That's the x coordinate of your vertex. So b is minus 1500, so negative minus 1500 over 2 times 100. A is 100, b is negative 1500, and so negative negative is positive, that's 200, and that gives you 7.5. So now you plug it back into the function, and you get minus 5625. So there's your vertex, 7.5, negative 5625. There's two ways to find a vertex. This way, figure out what minus b over 2a is, and then plug it into the function. Or you complete the square. Obviously completing the square is harder, but it is another way to find it. Alright, 51, write in descending order. Your a is minus 16, your b is 40, your c is 0. So negative b over 2a is negative 40 over 2 times negative 16, which reduces to 40 over 32, or 5/4, or 1.25. So now you plug that into the original function, and you get 25. So your vertex is 1.25, 25. So your maximum value is 25, and if they ask you where you find it, you would say at x equals 1.25. Alright, 13. Here's your a, b, and c. I reduced this guy down, so I made it a lot simpler than that ugly fraction. Okay, and so I got negative 0.08, positive 1, and positive 5. So negative 1 over 2 times a, and you reduce everything and you get 6.25. Plug it back into the original function, and you get 8.125. So you've got a maximum at 8.125, and it's found at 6.25. Okay, and now how do you find your x-intercepts? You figure out your a, b, and c, and you plug them into the formula. This is a problem where I think we're throwing a ball. Yeah, so you can't throw the ball in a negative direction. So we're ignoring the negative 3 number, and we only get the positive number at 16.3. It reaches a peak at x equals 6.5, and its peak is 8.125 feet, and the length of the throw is 6.25